All right, everyone, I want to welcome you to an episode of the AdCast. And today I have my favorite attorney. His name is Mr. Barrett Brewer of the Brewer Law Firm. Terry, if you could give Barrett a round of applause for being our favorite attorney around here. All right, so Terry, I'm excited to talk to Barrett today. He's not one that you guys would see on television, but trust me, this guy is very, very effective at what he does. He is, just to kind of tout his resume just a little bit, he spent his entire career representing clients across South Carolina in jury trials spanning across personal injury, defamation, general business matters, construction, real estate, you kind of name it. He's a board certified attorney. And Barrett's tried cases in the jury throughout the state, and he's tried over 100 cases, probably more than that right now, I'll let him tell you, in state and federal court, as well as practicing in the appellate courts. Barrett, did I get anything wrong here about you?
Not one bit. And you and I have known each other for so long that you would know better than anyone else.
All right. Now, Barrett, for those folks that actually don't know who Barrett Brewer is, take a couple of seconds and kind of tell them who Barrett Brewer is and also the Brewer Law Firm.
Will do. Thanks, Eric. It's great to be with you today. My name is Barrett Brewer. I'm originally from Eastern North Carolina. Grew up and went to Chapel Hill and Wake Forest for law school and came down here about 2002 and started practicing with a great firm down here for about 16 or so years where I was a partner. And I met my wife down here. She works with me now. Her name is Jessica, and we have three beautiful girls together. And we started the Brewer Law Firm together about 4 years ago now. I'm entering my fourth year after leaving the large firm I'd been with for about 16 plus years. And it's been wonderful. We really carved out a good niche for ourselves here as a trial practice, focusing on complex civil litigation, business litigation, defamation, and personal injuries. And what the difference is, I think you mentioned earlier, you probably haven't seen me on the TV. The big difference is those cases I'm trying are cases where they're complicated, it's hard to find the money, and it's big money at stake. The guys that you're seeing on TV are some of my favorite lawyers, right? They're some of your favorite lawyers now.
Yeah.
Business model is a little different. Their business model, there's usually a really easy person to identify that needs to be sued, and there's an easy source of money. It's insurance, and it's usually people who are injured working for them or in a car accident. My clients have a harder way to find the money. They're usually professionals, they're business persons in the area, or they're people with a really unique kind of problem where it isn't clear who you got to sue, and it ain't clear how you're going to get the money. And you need someone who's got splits the difference between the really big law firms in town who will never represent you to sue somebody else for money, right? And the guys who are doing what we just talked about, who are focused on getting recoveries for injuries from employers and car accidents. So that's where the range of areas you mentioned come into play for us. And we really have provided a nice little niche that's been needed here in town. And that's where most of my business comes from. It's other lawyers needing help with their cases, and they refer the work to me or people that we've just marketed with and networked in the area.
Yeah. So I have a kind of a two-part question for you, Barrett. What made you just say, I want to become a lawyer, and then what made you just start the Brewer Law Firm?
God, that was tough. Probably what made me want to become a lawyer is I talk a lot. I had an English major and didn't have a better career for it. And what really the question you're asking is, how did I get into trying cases? And I don't mind telling you, when you go into law school, they don't tell you, you know, give you a course on how to figure out what you want to do. And so what I found out is I was really creative and good on my feet. I liked talking and I liked figuring out problems. And so where that led me to was a trial career, right? A career where I got up in front of juries, I tried cases, and I win and sometimes lose. And from there, that led me with the bigger firm I was with, gave me the background to handle uh, different kinds of matters, things that fell in the cracks that weren't serviced by the vast majority of lawyers you either see on TV or meet in person. And that becomes, very complicated breach of contract cases. That
Right.
becomes defamation cases because that's kind of a new deal. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. That involves serious personal injury cases for professionals, people who own businesses, and other kinds of really intricate business disputes, usually involving insurance coverage and trying to find money out of insurance companies. So that background kind of led together to a real neat practice that I really enjoy. It's challenging and I'm good at it. And that's the thing I found the most joy in is being good at something my clients really appreciate it over and over. So
Now, you mentioned like in law school, they don't teach you some things, and a lot of things they don't teach you in law school is how to run your own practice. They may teach you how to do the law, but not to run your own practice. But how beneficial was that for you working for another established firm in the kind of hanging your own shingle per se? I mean, how was that for you?
well, I was a partner in my practice for, gosh, 6, 7 years. And so because of that, that gave me the experience that a lot of people coming out just don't have, right? Because they go in, open up their own law practice, and you really are trying to pick between the main categories or flavors of things that you know about. Like, do I want to do real estate closings? Do I want to represent people in workers' comp cases or personal injury cases? Am I a
Hmm.
state lawyer? I want to set up wills. And those are clearly very legitimate areas, but it takes sometimes having a little bit more experience and practicing with a firm with a lot more partners with issues that come up for you to really see the nuanced areas that fill in those gaps that aren't those kind of primary categories we just talked about. So for example, when you run a trial practice like I do, the hardest thing for me to do is give someone the 2 minute elevator pitch for the kinds of
Mm,
things I cover, because the reality is the kinds of things I'm covering are people have weird problems that pop up in their businesses, right? Things they didn't
right.
expect, and they don't even know how to handle it, because even though it's their business. So I have to learn their business, right? I have to learn about this unique issue. And quite frankly, the vast majority of issues that are popping up for me are new issues for the client, for me, and other lawyers. There aren't usually a lot of people covering. If you talk about interesting litigation cases, this past year, I helped a client sue the state of South Carolina over millions of dollars. The state said my client was owed them because of gaps in the statutory code. And there wasn't a lot of lawyers doing that. In fact, there was no lawyers doing that because there's only one business in the state doing it, my client.
Wow.
Right? So we had to figure it out, and we had to come up with a new way to approach it. And we won. We won my client millions of dollars back in their pocket this past year. But on the other hand, we talk about the defamation cases and how interesting they are. What's so new and interesting about those cases, and you don't see a lot of lawyers practicing it, is social media has changed the entire world, right?
Absolutely.
How do you recover when people tarnish you, your profession, your ability to do your job online? And where does that money come from? Because it's not required. You drive a car and you hit somebody, you have to have car insurance, right?
Yeah.
You employ people and they get injured on the job, you got to have workers' comp. So where do you get the money from if someone has completely ruined your business or another business has ruined you? Where do you get that money from? And so that becomes the real core of most of my practice is taking these unique litigation problems that typically revolve around suing businesses, representing businesses, individuals, serious injury to those people, and taking those complex problems where sometimes the insurance coverage isn't clear, and figuring out a way to get to the end result that's not tried and true and is not the stuff that you might hear about graduating from law school. So it's a unique practice and it covers a few areas, but it always boils down to the same thing. I'm a complex trial attorney, and I go
Yeah.
to court all the time.
Well, I mean, you handle some unique issues. So how do you always have to sometimes you said you have to learn their business, but how do you approach every case, Barrett? I mean, because you come across different situations all the time, but how do you approach every case? Is there a certain mindset? It's like when I played sports, I had to get my mind ready for it. So how do you get ready for special cases like that?
Well, the first thing I do if I'm meeting with a client is I want to make sure that we agree that this is good business, right? I want to make sure it's a good business decision for them and for me, because one or two of two things is going to happen. Either we've reached an arrangement where I think it's such a good case that I'm going to put my money on the line. I'm going to take it as a contingency case. I'm
Yeah.
willing to front my money to cover it. So I want to make sure it's a good business decision for both you and me, right?
Right.
Sometimes there's so much risk involved that we can't take it as a pure contingency matter. So we do alternative fee resolution issues where we might do split hourly and contingency, or I might, in the case where we sued the state and my client owed the money, we took a contingency on the difference between what we saved them, right? We take these
Got it.
unique ways to approach it to see if it's a good business decision for you and me. And if it's not a good business decision for me or you, the next question I have for my client is, do you want to spend that kind of money litigating the case, right? Because
Right.
I'm fond of saying that the most expensive lesson everyone makes is a principled decision, right? I'm going to
Oh,
go get that guy one way or the other. Costs everyone a lot of money. So that's the very first thing I do in my mindset is say, this is what we're going to do is going to be complicated. It's going to require a lot of time, effort, and lawyering. And I want to
mhm.
make sure both you and I are ready for that battle. And then once we do that, it then takes me sitting with the client, engaging with them, and immersing myself in their business, in the law if it applies, and trying to figure out what's the most creative way to help me get from A to B, um, financial and do it in a financially responsible way for them. So yeah, it's spending a lot of time on each case is the reality, and spending a lot of time learning people's businesses. And I actually really think that's my favorite part of what I do.
Now, you mentioned like doing a case for the state, and we can't go into particulars and anything like that. But uh, for the folks that think like that a boutique firm or even a smaller firm or even a newer firm can't get big results, that's a big misconception now. Explain that. I mean, have you ever come across where people would say, "I think my problem's too big for you," and how do you break that down for them, Barrett?
I actually think it's the other way around. Part of the niche that I found is having flexibility in how we run our practice and how we approach things. And what you end up finding is, there are also wonderful lawyers at some of the biggest firms in town with some of
Right.
the experience. But what you find is sometimes those firms are constrained in the ways that they can help you, and they're
Right.
constrained in who they can go after because they are so big and they have so many clients with so many different interests that they can't always step on everyone's toes
Mm.
the way a firm my size can. So we're much more nimble, right? I have fewer select clients, which means I've got people that I'm very loyal to and are loyal to me, and I don't have to worry about stepping on the toes of other companies that I'm not doing business with directly. I don't have 20 other partners in other parts of the state or even 100 other partners in other parts of the country, right?
Right.
Where I have to worry about who we're suing and whose feathers we're going to ruffle. So the politics of the larger firms, even though they might have the experience I have to do what I could do,
It may not be as nimble.
usually they usually don't, and they usually can't because they're going to be constrained on what they do. So they typically defend cases, right?
Okay.
Politically, those bigger firms are safer solely defending cases because no one ever gets mad at them for just defending a client, right?
Got it.
Look at your plaintiffs' law firms, even the ones that you've interviewed and that you represent in your own business. Some of those firms are much larger, but they're always representing individuals and never representing larger companies. So they also have kind of a siloed business interest. You see what I mean? Where they don't have to
Yeah.
worry about conflicts of interest or who they're making mad, right? Because it's always the little guy, the individual versus the establishment, right? The companies, big
Right.
business, insurance, right?
Right.
And so my position allows me to thread the needle in both worlds. And what that really developed was the ability for me to develop a practice that is a plaintiff's practice that represents a lot of businesses and individuals suing bigger businesses and individuals. And that's really a facet of my practice that's kind of missing in the marketplace and that we kind of plugged in real well.
Talk about threading the needle. Now, is it harder for you to, because like you said, you're not the TV lawyer, but still you're doing big things. But is it harder for people to be able to find you to do this?
You know what I was thinking about earlier before you called is one of the hardest things for me because I'm actually going to pick on me through you for a second. That I was looking at one of the things we're going to talk about is, marketing and social media. And one of the things that my dear friend and mentor Eric is always telling me is I've
Oh man, you're
got
too kind.
to post my results on social media more. And I have great results and have great big dollar value results for my clients. But my clients aren't always in the position to allow me to share those details online, right?
Correct.
My
Correct.
clients aren't in a position where they want me to go out and scream to the high heavens, look at the millions of dollars I made.
Look at this check.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for that ends up being because the bigger these cases are, quite frankly, and the more sensitive the litigation issue is, quite frankly, there's things like confidentiality agreements where
Yep.
we may not be allowed to discuss what the result is, other than to speak generically. I got these generic results for this generic client regarding this generic issue, and in an unspecified amount of money. Right.
Right.
Do that. And then sometimes the client doesn't want you to talk about it at all because they don't want it made public. So, the real issue becomes a lot of my the cultivation of my business comes from other professionals who know what I do, who know what my skill set is, and get the work to me because they know there's not a lot of people filling that spot in the market. And they know the results because professionals talk to each other, right? Lawyers talk to each other. The clients might even tell other friends of theirs in their small world, oh, use Barrett. He did a great job for us. Use Brewer Law Firm because they did a great job and people will know what they're talking about. So I have to use, what I've had to relegate myself to for social media is trying to cultivate an image of knowing what I'm talking about and being confident in my job and being a lawyer's lawyer, really. And to the extent I can publish results. But that's been probably my biggest challenge in using social media to my advantage, right? Is how to pump your clients' results and pump your own image when one of the things your clients value most about you is the discretion at which you
Right.
got there.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. They may love the fact that you are very discreet.
That's right. So that's kind of one of the biggest challenges we have with marketing, but it's not. I have found that you learn this when you're a young lawyer from your older partners that the best word and advertising out there is word of mouth. And so
Absolutely. Even still
we start
today.
there. That's right, and we start there. I mean, we have spent years, making ourselves known in the community. Quite frankly, earning it the hard way, right?
Right.
And this is a small enough market. I practice statewide, but the vast majority of my work is in the Low Country. Up from Beaufort up to Myrtle Beach, and then primarily in the Charleston Tri-County area, and then oftentimes and sometimes up in the Midlands and Upstate. But the reality for my practice is there aren't enough lawyers doing what I do that people aren't talking about you and the handful of other really good lawyers who have a practice similar to mine. So that's where the world is small, so it's easier for word of mouth to get out because you stand out in a smaller market of who do we go to for hard problems, who's a accomplished trial attorney, right? And who's got the flexibility in their business model to be able to handle this client's problem, get them a result, and do it in the best way possible. So that's been the benefit of that.
Wow. Barrett, I mean, great topics. I want us to go to break right now. And then when we come back, I want to jump into defamation and business litigation. Is that okay? All right.
Sure.
This is the AdCast. Hey, I'm Eric. You may wonder exactly what it is. Hey, I'm Eric it's me. It's me just giving you the authentic, the real, the 100% me, right? There are teams that I work with, VIP Marketing, which is one of the best marketing agencies in the country. And then there's also Craft Creative, which is also one of the best creative teams in the country. And here I am in the middle. I'm the guy that you want to be able to hire to come and speak at your next event, talk to you or coach your team through whatever you're going through. So the next time you're thinking about how to get through what you're going through, go to heyimeric.com.
You're listening to the AdCast, the podcast for marketers and advertisers with your host, Eric Elliott.
All right, this is the AdCast, and I'm back with Mr. Barrett Brewer of the Brewer Law Firm. We were just talking about just his practice and how complex of some issues that he gets, and he has to unravel them. And he's that attorney that some attorneys actually come to. So great topics and conversation here. But one thing you brought up earlier in our conversation was defamation. And you talked about how social media can have an impact in things now. I mean, it wasn't this way 15 years ago, but now, I mean, let's talk about defamation. Do you see defamation cases on the rise? But also, what explain what is a defamation case?
Sure. Defamation litigation really arises out of people harming someone's reputation or character by making a false statement of fact and publishing that to the world at large. And I think the thing that's worth pointing out is it's been around forever, right? But the primary way that arose historically was the newspaper or maybe the TV station
Hmm.
said something or published an article about you or your business that was defamatory. And those lawsuits were traditionally very difficult. There weren't a lot of them out there because if it was newsworthy and the newspaper or the TV carried it, you had the First Amendment to protect the news station or the newspaper.
Wow.
And so it wasn't really a terribly pervasive business model. There were law firms handling it, and they predominantly did First Amendment work. What changed out of all that and how my practice kind of came into that is with the advent of social media, anyone can publish anything to the world.
Everyone's an
Back,
editor.
back right back in the day, uh, anyone might say something defamatory about somebody, but it might not have gone beyond your neighborhood, right, or your church group, and then people wouldn't actually file a lawsuit because right? After the inauguration and Bernie Sanders, there's a Bernie Sanders meme,
The meme.
right?
Yeah.
Hot as of today's date, which is the
Right.
22nd of January, is everywhere across social media. And that to me is a good example of how quickly something that someone might see as funny spreads to the far reaches of the United States, right? So now there's a world for that litigation to pop up because it gets to areas where it's not worth smoothing it over. It's not worth going and making sure that the people in your church or the people in your neighborhood know I'm not that terrible thing that you've accused me of.
Right.
I've got no other way of getting that message out but to sue somebody, right? One of the big lawsuits I actually was just downloading the other day to read is the Dominion voting systems lawsuit. So if you remember over the past election cycle, there was these
Oh yeah.
claims
The attorneys.
right, there were these claims of election tampering and election fraud. And what was really fascinating out of that is most of it's political, without taking sides on it. The company running the voting machines didn't find it that funny because they got brought into it and they're not politicians.
Yeah.
The First Amendment has a different effect for this company who no one had ever heard of that's not running for office, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We get up and accuse them of, tampering with their own equipment to put their thumb on the scale of an election. So they've gone out on a campaign of filing lawsuits now against the various politicians and whomever brought that issue up. And
Wow.
it's amazing to me because that's their only mechanism of restoring their reputation. Because all of a sudden, if they're not trusted to conduct a safe election, then all of a sudden they're out of business the next day. So a lot of my clients end up being individuals, professionals, businesses, quite frankly, who are suing businesses who have tarnished their reputation. One thing that's not been a great business model, and probably won't be for some time, is an individual calling me up and saying, "Well, so and so said something nasty about me on the internet or on social media," and it's
Hmm.
an acquaintance, a friend of theirs, right? There ain't a lot of justice for that, right? There's not a good lawsuit against the guy sitting in their mother's basement halfway across the state who said something nasty to you. However, most of my lawsuits have arisen out of a professional in the area, let's say, who another professional or business has either in advertising themselves and trying to promote themselves above their competitors have really tarnished the other guy, right? Or people who just get a bad taste in their mouth and say, you know what, I'm gonna make sure the world knows what a terrible person you are, right? And they say something defamatory, which ends up being a false statement of fact. If I call you a jerk, that doesn't count, right? But if I say that, Barrett Brewer is a lying attorney who will never do anything for his clients but cheat, steal, and rob from them, right? You're accusing me of a crime and accusing me of something that's part of my ethical profession and part of my requirements in my job. And if it's not true, if I haven't stolen from clients, if I haven't, committed malpractice on one of their cases, then I might have a claim against you, right? And a lot of people feel that's something they need to do because social media can carry it so far. And not to mention that people can also snipe people somewhat anonymously, right? They just kind of come out of nowhere and
Mm-hmm.
really attack people anonymously. So one of the things we'll do is not only file lawsuits, but help people try to protect their reputations as best they can by trying to pair them up with professionals. Sometimes people like you to rehab their reputation in the area. But that spun out of a plaintiff's business practice, right? That kind of came out of the business litigation practice.
Right.
And mostly because those clients needed that service and they needed an aggressive lawyer to figure that area out. And it's hard to find that money. Last year, we just settled a case where an an IT professional and a lawyer were defamed by somebody online and in social media, and that person did it through their business, and we were able to get that person's business to cover them for $2 million, and that was a big claim we were able to get resolved this year. But I'll tell you, when it started off, no one thought that there was money, and no one thought we could recover, and so that's the kind of good creative work that we've been doing here, over the last 4 years.
Man, I've said it before and I will say it again. The internet and all that social media stuff, it is instant, constant, and permanent. It is instantly available, just like you said with the Bernie Sanders. It is people can constantly go back to it as a reference, and it is permanently there forever. You can delete it as much as you want, but it's still there. It's not going anywhere. So instant, constant, and permanent. So when you're putting something online, you remember there's people like Barrett out there, and he'll come get you, right?
And one of the things that you talk about, like what you'll get there eventually if you haven't already. But what do I do to promote myself on social media? And one of the things
Mhm.
I try to do is to try to be a voice in social media to remind people that their words matter, right? Like
Yeah.
I would like to promote the responsible side of it and promote the old comic book concept, right? With great power comes great responsibility. When you have the power to reach a lot of people and you have the power to say things that matter. And I think a lot of people, because of the way they can sit on their couch at home with the TV on and can just spout off the last thing that came across their mind, they do it without thinking about what those consequences are. And what my preference would be that's a world where I don't get so many calls on it, right? I think
Right.
my preference would be that we live in a world where people are a little more cognizant of what they're saying. They're willing to do the research on what they're saying and make sure if they're going to say something serious and harmful that they understand what they're saying and understand the consequences to others. Yeah.
Wow. One other topic that I know that you have a lot of experience in is business litigation, and sometimes that's partner to partner. People who've been together for a long time. So, are those pretty complex issues as well for you?
They can be, and sometimes they're simple. Everything business litigation covers a whole wide gamut of everything from contract disputes, partnership and shareholder disputes, real estate development, insurance bad faith lawsuits, intellectual property, and sometimes just plain old lawsuits by companies against the government. But they do cover a wide range, but the bottom and common denominator is my business either has lost money, is losing money or someone's wronged us. It's
Yeah.
not terribly different than a personal injury case that any of the other lawyers you might have had on have talked about, except it's how do we get the wrong righted, right? And where does the money come from? Is the bottom line to them all. They do tend to be, in partnership disputes, Eric, they can be as simple as a divorce, if you will, right? Two people are just done with each other and they've got to litigate it out. But more often, it is someone's accusing another person or company of committing fraud, of violating their fiduciary duties to one another.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, that's the underlying concept for all those lawsuits. If you have to sue your insurance company because they didn't pay related to some other claim that was made against you, that is the insurance company either defrauding you, hopefully, uh, or committing and engaging in acts that are done with a bad intent. And usually when there's real estate development disputes, it's someone gets goes the deal goes south, right? And everyone's trying to figure out who's going to be responsible. And there's typically claims that someone has defrauded one another, or that the contract was breached. And usually there's claims back against each other. So it's not always that simple of I'm just going to go sue that person. They're typically going to sue you back. And
Wow.
so they do get very heated and intense. The vast majority of them work out. Most of the people who are clients in those cases are people who are trying to make a decision about how much is this going to cost me to get from the beginning to the end, and what am I likely to win or lose. And one of the things I try to do along the way is help educate the client as to what the risk is, how much is in it, and how much you have to lose, and just try to provide them as many off ramps as they can to try to get out of it if they can, and to try to resolve it and find a way to move on with life. And so a lot of those cases end up finding a way to resolve. But that's where those defamation claims came from. They were a form of plaintiff's lawsuit that came about because professionals and businesses and individuals needed to find a way to recover against other companies and professionals that were ruining them out in the public. And so it's all kind of an interrelated practice to some degree.
Wow. Let's give Barrett a round of applause right here. Now. Let's give him a round of applause. Barrett, we're gonna wrap this up. We're gonna take our final break and come back with the lightning round, and then we're gonna wrap up the AdCast. You have been a fantastic guest. You heard that? I think that was a lightning. Let's do it one more time. That's a lightning round there for you, Barrett. All right, we're gonna take our final break and come back with a little more Barrett Brewer for you guys, and this is the AdCast. There's so many times that people want to turn conversations and make them consultations. So what did we do? We created the ultimate conversation and consultation platform. It's called the AdCast. It's our newest podcast. You can find us anywhere that you listen to your podcast. And if you are unsure on where to find us, go to veryimportantplacement.com.
You're listening to the AdCast, the podcast for marketers and advertisers with your host, Eric Elliott.
All right, I am back with my favorite attorney, Mr. Barrett Brewer of the Brewer Law Firm. Just a wealth of information. We talked about defamation. We talked about business litigation. We even talked about Bernie Sanders, too. I think it's the first time Bernie Sanders has come up in any episode of the AdCast. But now I want us to go in what we call the lightning round right now. And in this lightning round, Barrett, what we're going to do is we're going to ask you about some of these different medias that you and I talked about, and we want to get your opinion on them. There's no right or wrong answer. So I'll ask you about social media. I'll ask you about your thoughts on television, billboard, radio, and we'll make this really brief and wrap it up for you, Barrett. And the first one I'll give you is radio.
Radio. About advertising on radio?
Yep.
I've never done it, Eric. I think that radio is probably a very effective means of getting people, if you're a lawyer, getting people who are in commutes, and if that's your kind of target audience, I think that's probably a good way for you to get to those persons. And I've never spent a moment advertising on the radio. This is my first even approximation to it.
Awesome. All right, television.
Television, man. I think I've heard you say it best. Television, it is amazing how many legal advertisements are on television these days. It is quite frankly, something that when I started was almost non-existent. And so the lawyers who have figured out that market and how to make that a positive market for themselves, I just applaud. I think it takes a lot of managing of your identity and a lot of management of your brand in the marketplace, and then fiercely promoting that. And I think the lawyers who have done that and have promoted their brand that way have been just really amazing to watch because they are masters of what they're doing right
Newspaper.
now. Newspaper. I don't know anyone who even gets the newspaper these days. I think, quite frankly, if I had to think about advertising in the newspaper, it would be related to my social media presence and my making sure that I had ads going through the apps on newspapers, because I think that most of my clients, that's where they would see me. But I would probably never take out a full page ad in the paper for me these days because I don't think that's who my clients are.
Billboard advertising.
Same thing I said about the radio. I think that's a commuter's audience, right? I think that by and large, you're trying to get people who are on I-26, for example, or 526, who are on their commutes. And if you can identify that those are the people, for instance, if you do car accidents, right? And that's the vast majority of what you're doing, having someone who can see that billboard after they rear-ended somebody in the interchange is probably a great place for you, you know?
Social media.
I think social media is where most lawyers are trying to navigate now and trying to find where their place in the world is. And I think it's because it's flexible, right? It allows you to target different people. It allows you to cultivate yourself however you want, and you can use it a lot of different ways. I can pay for the ads. I can use podcasts. I mean, that's really a form of social media, isn't
Absolutely. It is.
it? You put it up on Facebook, and I think that the limitless possibilities and the low entrance of cost to social media is really where it's at, and that's we said some negative things about social media, but let's be fair. There's a lot of positive that comes with it,
There is.
and that one of the positives of it is the number of people you can reach with good positive messages, right? As opposed to
That's true.
negative ones.
That is true. And what is your favorite social media of them all? On which do you think is more effective?
Uh, I I would only say, just because of my place in life, I see the most people probably on doing advertising effectively on Facebook. I know there's advertising on Twitter and on Instagram, but for professionals, like myself in the area, I think I see most of them using Facebook most effectively. But that I'm going to also say that's probably a result of where I am in life, because I have three beautiful girls and I'm in the stage of life where everyone's posting pictures of their kids on Facebook, and that's where they're doing that. They're
Yeah,
not doing it other places.
absolutely.
And so I think that's where a lot of my peers are right now, and a lot of where my peers are looking. And my peers were 21 years old and 22 years old. They'd probably highly disagree with me.
Barrett, you have been a fantastic guest, man. We want to thank you one more time for just being with us. Thank you again. And I want to thank our listeners as well. And I want to thank you for being a guest, Barrett, once again. And what's next for you, Barrett? What's next? What's on the horizon for Barrett Brewer and the Brewer Law Firm?
The horizon for Barrett Brewer and the Brewer Law Firm. We've just added a new lawyer this year. We're excited about that. Amanda McKendrick has come to work with us. She's been a friend of mine for 20 years and is a wonderful lawyer. So we are getting her introduced to the world as the next great attorney here at this office. And I think that the next issue is trying to figure out the best way to navigate we mentioned my defamation practice and the personal injury practice, and to navigate how best to utilize social media the way you and I have talked to probably help that message across better, and to make sure we're getting directly to customers and clients without even having to rely on our referral sources. So that's probably our next two phases there.
That's a good phase. That's a good way and a good direction to go. Also want to thank you, Barrett, for being a guest. I want to thank our production and content team, Craft Creative, for being a studio sponsor. If you guys like this podcast, or you think that this podcast has been of great use to you or someone else can benefit it, make sure you tell them that we are everywhere. We're on YouTube, we're on Stitcher, iHeart. Terry, where else are we? We're on iHeart, on SoundCloud, everywhere. You can just find us anywhere. It's not hard at all. And I want to thank everyone for giving us their most valuable asset, which is their time. This has been the AdCast. Thank you, Barrett.
Today's show is sponsored in part by Craft Creative. Change your creative. Change your world with premium video production and graphic design. Get started by visiting WeCraftCreative.com.
You don't need a marketing agency. You do deserve very important placement. VIP Marketing and Advertising is a cutting-edge strategic digital, creative, media, and marketing partner that provides services for businesses of all sizes. To stay up to date on the latest marketing news, subscribe for email updates at veryimportantplacement.com.
If you feel this podcast has been a help to you or could be a help to others, please don't forget to subscribe. You can listen to our podcast anywhere, iHeart, Spotify, Apple Music, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And this episode is also going to be available on YouTube. To catch up on past episodes, go to heyi'meric.com, or you can always text me at 843-483-1555.
Copyright VIP Marketing and Advertising, produced by Craft Creative. For premium video production and graphic design, visit WeCraftCreative.com.